Hello, Raiders. The purpose of this video is to give people an opportunity who missed some of the notes to get caught up, or maybe I went too fast, to allow those people to get caught up. Or it's very possible that we didn't finish the notes in class, and this is your opportunity to do that. Chapter 4 is relatively a small chapter. Without further ado, here we go. Please remember to number your notes. Please remember to put them in Cornell note style. And here we go. All right, so there's two different types of cells. One is a primitive cell. Prokaryotic cells have no cell nucleus, no internal parts that have membranes on them. Example would be bacteria. These were the first living cells on the planet. Eukaryotic cells, those are the cells that make up humans and most complex organisms. They have a nucleus where the DNA is stored. They have membrane-bound organelles. All complex life is made of eukaryotic cells. Also, I will be going faster during this lecture than during this video than I would during normal lecture. You can always pause the video, and I will warn you when I'm going to the next slide. All right, so the definition of species: a group of living organisms that can sexually reproduce with one another and produce fertile offspring. And that's a big one, because if you produce offspring that itself cannot have its own offspring, then the two parents were different species. For example, a horse and a donkey can mate and have a mule, but the mule's chromosomes are so jacked up they can't themselves have their own offspring. Therefore, the horse and the donkey are separate species. Moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, species diversity. Estimated to be 7 to 10 million different species. Only about 2 of those have been identified. And half of those identified species are insects, which means that there are still many species on the planet that have yet to be identified, and it's potential that those species might be of importance to us. Unfortunately, the extinction rate is so fast that many of these species that have not been identified yet will be gone before we even have an opportunity. Lots of ecosystem services are done by insects. I just watched a documentary called Queen of the Bees, and it highlights decreasing honeybee populations worldwide, and bees and other insects and birds do a ton of pollination for us. It's really important that we make the planet livable for those organisms. Insect reproduction is sometimes really rapid. Because the life cycles of insects in particular are so fast, that leads to pesticide resistance. So if you dump a pesticide on a crop, and let's say there's 10,000 insects there and 15 of those survive, they pass on those resistance traits to their offspring, and then over time, a larger portion of the population has these traits, and eventually the pesticide will not work, and crop damage will occur, or new pesticides will have to be purchased. Moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Species or types of diversity. There's biodiversity, species diversity, which is simply the number of different species on the planet. Genetic diversity is the variation in our genes. And then ecosystem diversity is the different biomes. And a biome is a region on the planet with a distinct climate and distinct species types. All right, some vocabulary associated with forestry. The edge effect: conditions are different from the forest interior, such as temperature, light, and humidity, which means you can find different species on the edge of a forest versus in the middle of the forest. As forests become more fragmented by cutting down different parts of them, there's less core habitat and more edge habitat, which obviously harms the species that thrive in the core of the forest. And an ecotone is a transitional area where 2 different ecosystems merge. So that's going to be one edge of a forest potentially with the edge of a grassland, or the edge of a forest with a riparian, a river ecosystem. I'm moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, blank cells are simple and lack membranes, while blank cells are complex. Is that combination 1 or combination 2? Take a look back at number 1 of your notes. Yeah, so that's combination 1. Prokaryotic are simple, eukaryotic are complex. What's an important ecosystem service that insects provide? Take a look at number 4. Pollination. There are a number of different ecosystem services, but pollination is the big one. What are 2 factors that affect forest interiors? As forests are more blanked, there is blank core habitat and more edge habitat. Take a look at number 7. Yeah, so as forests become more fragmented, there's more edge habitat. Beg your pardon, there's less core habitat and more edge habitat. Moving around to the next one in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Functional diversity, energy flow, cycle mattering, matter cycling. We're talking about the water cycle, carbon cycle, phosphorus cycle, nitrogen cycle, nutrient cycling. Diverse ecosystem advantages. More plant biomass equals more consumer species. Certain species contain traits, characteristics that enable them to adapt to a changing environment, natural selection. Unfortunately, the environment is changing so rapidly in many cases that organisms that can't adapt that quickly are dying off. Species role in ecosystems, a niche, includes all that affects survival and reproduction. Water, space, sunlight, food, temperatures all influence a species niche. Moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Difference between a generalist and a specialist. A generalist is exactly what it sounds like. They are successful in a variety of habitats. Have a broad niche, a wide range of tolerances, eat a number of different things. Specialist, although, these are organisms that are a little bit more sensitive. They have a very narrow niche, which means that if you adjust many of the things that they need, food sources, space to live, breeding opportunities, that can negatively impact their species. Moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One advantage of having diverse ecosystems. Take a look back at number 9. Yeah, so more consumers, there's more plant biomass. And if you have diverse ecosystems, you're likely to have more organisms that could adapt to changing ecosystems. 3 things that affect a species niche. Take a look back at number 10. Yeah, water, space, sunlight, food, temperatures, competition, all those are going to affect a niche. A blank species has a broad niche, while a blank species has a narrow niche. Take a look at number 11 if you can't remember. Be generalist and specialist. All right, here we go. Pick 2 of these. So native species thrive in certain ecosystems. Non-native species migrate or they're accidentally brought into an ecosystem. That can be very detrimental to that ecosystem because if these non-native species are predatory or very aggressive or they breed quicker and other organisms haven't adapted to them being around, they can really mess up the ecosystem. Indicator species provide early warnings of environmental changes. And a keystone species have a large effect on the types and abundance of other species. So species that are really important to the ecosystem in terms of providing food or in terms of providing competition. There are a number of different reasons that a keystone species would be successful. All right, moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, an example of a keystone species is the American alligator. Sorry, I'm having a hard time. Alligator. Almost became extinct. Pick 3 of these things. So they dig gator holes, so that holds fresh water, and they serve as home and habitat for other aquatic species. In the 30s, they were hunted for sport, meat, and their skin. In 67, they were added to the endangered species list. 10 years later, they made a rapid comeback, and there are more than 1 million today in Florida. There are other reasons why it's an important keystone species, but a big one is that one of their behaviors provides habitat to other species. Moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, amphibian and reptile declines, parasites, viral fungal diseases, habitat loss and fragmentation is always a big one. More UV is getting through because of ozone destruction, pollution, climate change, overhunting. Lots of reasons for these organisms to be declining. Moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, match them up. Take a look back at number 12, 13, and 14 for these. So number 1, native species is C, thrive in a certain ecosystem. Number 2, non-native species is D, migrate to an ecosystem. 3, indicator species are used as early warnings of environmental change. So B, and then the last one, keystone species, they have a large effect on many other species. So A. 3 reasons why amphibian and reptile populations are becoming endangered and extinct. Take a look back at number 14. So overhunting, overfishing, pollution, climate change, a lot of the same themes. UV radiation, you might not have thought of that one before. Habitat loss, fragmentation, that's common. Increase in diseases, and some of these diseases are new to certain areas because as temperatures warm up, these parasites and pathogens can survive in different types of habitats. All sorts of stuff is going wrong. Okay, moving ahead in 3, 2, and 1. All right, so Simpson's Diversity Index measured both species richness and evenness. And as these both increase, so does the overall diversity. So species richness and species evenness, which is a measure of how many members of one species versus another. If those increase, overall diversity will as well. Importance of that, understanding ecosystem diversity makes it easier to use its resources sustainably. If you've got an incredibly diverse ecosystem, okay, you can use the resources a little bit more liberally. If you have an ecosystem that is suffering from diversity, you need to be much, much more careful. More species diversity equals more medical discoveries, potentially economic development. 40% of the world's economy and 80% of the world's economy, of the needs of the poor come from biological resources. So if we are harming biodiversity and putting at risk our biological resources, the economy and the world's population could suffer. Moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Last one, E.O. Wilson. Wrote The Diversity of Life in 92. He's recognized as the leading expert on biodiversity, and he got very involved in reading and teaching about the need for conservation. I'm moving ahead in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's one characteristic of Sir Simpson's diversity index. And so it measures species richness, species evenness, and if you have an increase in those, you have more diversity. If you have a decrease in those, you have less biodiversity. Why is understanding ecosystem diversity important? You can't use its resources sustainably unless you know about the ecosystem diversity in that ecosystem. What biological concept is E.O. Wilson an expert on? Take a look at 18. He is an expert on life's diversity. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the notes. Again, please make sure they're numbered. Please make sure they're in Cornell note format, and we will see you in class.